Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday for April 7th. I'm your host, David Michalek. So please introduce yourself in the comments here. Let me know where you're from. And if this is your first time on our weekly live, great to have you here. So in addition to taking your questions live today, we're going to be answering some of the most frequently asked questions that I've received this week. And to help me with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. He's worked for both FICO and Equifax, with over 2,000 media interviews and quotes and over 5,000 published media appearances on the subject of credit. He is America's #1 credit expert. Let's welcome John Ulzhiemer. All right. There he is. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thanks, guys, for introducing yourself. Appreciate it. Okay. So we got a couple of people on already and some people who are new. We got here, just bring in, got Nathan. Welcome, Nathan. Good to have you. And then Mike. First time. Welcome, Mike. Very good. And Jimmy. Thanks for doing this. Jimmy, you are very welcome. It is our pleasure. Okay. And we got Ruben coming in. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, what we're going to do is John and I are going to go over a couple of subjects first, the questions that I've gotten this week, and then it's going to be a free-for-all. And ask whatever questions you like. We'll do our best to answer them for you. So, John, we're going to cover one of your favorite subjects today. The inquiry keeps coming up all the time. It's very, very common, and the question that we're going to get to in a second is why is that the case? But the thing about inquiries that is so popular and so pronounced is, people might have collections and charge-offs and bankruptcies, but they're worried about the inquiry. So it's not the high utilization on the credit card, the current late payments, or maybe the authorized user is maxed out, or whatever the case may be. It's inquiries. That's the focus. It's almost it's this boogeyman that people focus on so much. So, with that being said, and I know this is one of your favorite subjects, I thought that I would start us off by playing the unofficial theme for inquiries for a few seconds, and then we're gonna get right to it. Here we go.
I already know what's coming.
We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We ain't talking about the game. We're talking about practice, man.
Okay.
That's it. My boy, Allen Iverson.
That's one of the favorite ones out there, which is, let's not talk about the game. Let's talk about practice. Okay, so John, the serious question is, how did we get here? Why is everybody so obsessed with inquiries? And can you talk a little bit about why they shouldn't be?
Yeah, so I actually was doing a presentation several years ago at a credit repair trade show, and I spent about an hour talking about inquiries. And there were tons of complaints to the organizer of the event saying that was an entire waste of an hour. We shouldn't be talking about inquiries. And my response was like, well, stop asking questions about them if you don't want me to talk about them. And so from that point forward, I'm like, you know what? Unless someone asks me about them, I'm not going to talk about them. And I even threw up that entire 9-minute Allen Iverson interview about how he was railing on the reporters for wasting his time talking about irrelevant stuff like practice rather than the important stuff like the game.
Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons why people like to obsess about inquiries is because bloggers spend too much time writing about them. There's also a provision of the Fair Credit Reporting Act that requires lenders to disclose if inquiries were meaningful in your credit score if they've denied you credit, which I don't understand why that became codified into law. But what you end up seeing on denial letters is things like derogatory credit card debt.
Yeah.
Number of inquiries was a meaningful factor. And so boom, it kind of elevates the perceived importance of the inquiry when the reality is that they are, if you had to put them on the list of the grand scheme of things that affect credit scores, they are the lowest thing on the list. And but nonetheless, we spend a lot of time talking about them. I write a lot of articles about them at requests of my clients. And here we are on a lovely evening in April talking about them.
Yeah, and I think you said one of the most important parts about this, which is it's that adverse action letter. I think
Yep.
because I've seen so many of them from clients over the years, and on the bottom, it always has something to do with inquiries. And if you
Right.
see that enough, I think that, and that's always been something that I've wondered about, is why it seems like a default position on an adverse action letter. And for you watching, that simply it's a denial letter that they have to send you if they turn you down for credit. But it says inquiries so often, doesn't it?
Well, those letters, those adverse action notices are what's referred to as form letters. So the layout and the information in those letters is identical across all lenders because the disclosures are required attributes. So all that stuff that you see on an adverse action letter is required. So it's basically just a form that they all use. But you're right. I mean, one of the components of that form is if the inquiries on your credit report cost you one single point in your
Yeah.
score, then they've got to disclose that, and it elevates the importance of them. It's taking up real estate on an adverse action notice when it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I don't know what politician decided that was a smart thing to I guess include in a bill that eventually modified the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But whatever. I mean, if to the extent they want to tell people that an inquiry costs them X point, and you know the what's missing out of those letters is it doesn't ever quantify the effect of the inquiry. It doesn't say it cost you 5 points or cost you 8 points, cost you 9 points. It just says that it was meaningful to your score,
Yeah.
and so it gives this perception that it was more important than it actually. In 30s, known someone to be denied credit because it inquiries on the credit report. It was because of other stuff on their credit report or stuff having nothing to do with their credit reports, things like income or LTV or DTI. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the inquiry has all of a sudden become the most important thing in some people's minds.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where we are. And like I said, we've got this in our inbox and on post so many times this week. I'm like, well, I guess we're going to have to talk about it.
Sure.
So
yeah, no, I'm
John,
fine talking about it. I just don't want to hear any complaints afterwards that I talked about it. I mean, I'm
No, I
responding
don't
to
think-
a question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll spend maybe a minute or 2 or 3 on it, and
You can't.
and then if
You can't. That's the problem. Is they're so complicated. You've got to spend 13 or 14 minutes if you want to give an accurate answer or an appropriate answer. That's the problem. It's one of these.
Yeah.
It's that important, but it takes up. I can't see myself on the screen. It takes up that amount of time. And so,
Yeah.
so you end up spending a ton of time on it when you really should be spending time on other things.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Maybe one thing you can go over, and if we get specific questions on the inquiries, then we'll cover it. But maybe you can just cover like some of the basics. How long do they affect you? Soft inquiry versus a hard inquiry. High level overview on inquiries.
Yeah, so there's 2 categories of inquiries. Every single inquiry falls into one of 2 categories, soft and hard. And soft inquiries are not seen by anybody other than the consumer when they pull a copy of their own credit reports. So they're not seen by credit scoring systems, they're not seen by lenders, they're only seen by you, which means they are entirely benign, they have no influence over anything at all. So boom, we've just gotten rid of soft inquiries in a half a minute. Hard inquiries, it's a little bit more complicated. There are a bunch of different types of hard inquiries. The overwhelming majority of hard inquiries are ignored because of sophisticated logic in both FICO's credit scoring systems and VantageScore's credit scoring systems that attempts to model whether or not you are shopping for credit from multiple lenders and just looking for the best deal, or if you really are out there trying to open up a bunch of different types of accounts.
Yeah.
So that's why you start seeing all this stuff in the articles about 30 days this, 45 days that, 14 days this, and all that stuff is correct, but it's correct for different types of scores, types of inquiries. And so the long and short of it is that the overwhelming majority of inquiries don't count at all. But when they do count, they're very, very meaningless, except to the extent that they take up some data on an notice. So They have no redeeming value. They are either neutral or negative. They can't help your score. And once a hard inquiry turns 12 months old, even though it may cosmetically still remain on your credit report, it is no longer seen by scoring systems, because scoring systems only care about inquiries when they're less than a year old, if they do consider them at all.
And if you could just maybe put a little more, go into a little more detail about deduping, the act of shopping. I think that's a really important thing to explain to people, because one of the things I see a lot is, I got to dispute all these inquiries because I went to go buy a car and there's 8 inquiries on my credit report, and those made my credit score drop 20, 30, 50 points, whatever it is.
I think that what you're referring to, there's two technical terms with respect to the treatment of inquiries. One is called buffering, and the other is called deduping or collapsing. You may hear that term sometimes. Collapsing and deduping are the same thing. So in FICO's credit scoring systems, and by the way, this varies by FICO generation, and also VantageScore doesn't treat inquiries the same way as FICO. So there's a lot of different answers to the question of how are inquiries treated.
Okay.
But in most of the commonly used scoring systems by FICO, in FICO 8 has critical mass of users on it. So the answer I'm giving you is based on FICO 8 and newer, because those are the ones that have the most users in the FICO world. Any inquiry that is less than 30 days old, that is from a bank, credit union, finance company, student loan lender, any organization where you can get a loan and shop around for the best rate, is ignored. When they're less than 30 days old, they're ignored. So you may see a lot of content on websites and in articles that talk about how auto, mortgage, and student loan inquiries. Well, that's true, but it's also it also considers any type of lender where you can get those types of accounts. So credit union inquiries, finance company inquiries, bank inquiries. You can get an auto, a mortgage, and a student loan from all those organizations. And so even those types of inquiries, because if you look at a credit report and you see an inquiry and the inquiry reads Chase or Wells Fargo, it doesn't say what you applied for. It just says the name of the bank that pulled the credit report. So the way the scoring system defaults is that it kind of errs on the side of the consumer, and it assumes that you're applying for something with that organization where you could possibly be shopping around with competing lenders trying to get the best deal. And so while it's true when you talk about auto, mortgage, and student loan, it's much more comprehensive than just that. So it's any lender where you can get those types of loans, not necessarily just those types of loans. So if they're less than 30 days old, they don't count at all. You can have 1,000 of them. They don't count. They're invisible to the scoring model. Once they leave the 30-day window, meaning that they've now become 31 days old, now they're fair game. And they can be seen by scoring models and they can be considered. However, this process of collapsing or deduping, as you called it, also attempts to kind of protect the consumer from having kind of an unfair impact of all these inquiries. And so to the extent that you have all those inquiries and they're within 45 days of each other, then the model presumes that you're shopping for a good interest rate, not shopping for 7 mortgages, which is silly. No one does that. And so the model assumes that you're just looking for 1 mortgage. And so it actually dedupes and collapses all those and considers them to be single inquiry. Even though on the credit report you have all of those inquiries, the model only considers them as 1. And then, of course, once they hit a year old, then it doesn't matter how old, what type they are. They don't count at all. And so you may have noticed that I did not mention credit cards. You don't shop around for the best deal on credit cards. The deal you get at Cap One is the deal you get at Cap One. The deal you get at Discover is the deal you get at Discover. So credit card inquiries are not protected by that 30-day buffer and then the 45-day collapsing logic like the other ones are. In VantageScore, it's a little bit different. There is no 30-day buffer and 45-day dedupe, and there's nothing specific to auto, mortgage, and student loan like there is in FICO. VantageScore is a little bit more liberal on one end and conservative on the other. Any inquiry of any variety that occurs within a 14-day period of another inquiry of any variety is collapsed into 1. And so I guess the takeaway is if you can get all of your rate shopping done within 14 days, then you're going to be golden across all credit scoring systems, and you'll be fine. Because then the effect of the inquiry is going to be what it intended to be, which is you're looking for a form of credit, not 7 forms of credit.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, that's going to answer the inquiry question for a lot of people who look at 4, 5, 6, 8 inquiries from an auto dealership or mortgage, and then worry that that's going to have a multiplied effect on their score, which it, as you explained, does not. Okay, before we get too buried down in here, we got a couple of questions. Al Mustafa, I'm not sure if we can answer that one because it has more to do with banking. Let's bring in Mike's question. This is a big one. Okay, is it true that the bureaus do not have to send a paper trail to you since the CARES Act? I went with a company and they have not received any paper trail since April of last year. So I left them and I'll be joining Versio. Okay, so I'm assuming, Mike, that you're talking about you're doing some disputes and they're not sending you anything. Fortunately, John here is an expert when it comes to the CARES Act. Do you want to read that back up there?
So I got to be real honest with you. No, I can see Mike's question in the question.
Okay.
Is it true that the credit bureaus do not have to send you a paper trail since I have to be honest with you, there's not as an amendment.
You're breaking up pretty bad. Well, let's try this. Oh, here we go. Okay, seems like you're back.
I'm going to have to ask Mike to clarify because I'm not aware of any sort of paper trail requirement in the CARES Act. There may be, remember the CARES Act is like 900 pages, okay? But as it pertains to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it's only a small slice of the CARES Act that amends the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So I don't know what paper trail I'm not aware of any amendment today because of it requires the credit bureaus to send you what you're referring to as a paper trail. Maybe you mean something other than paper trail.
Yeah,
so if you want to clarify that.
Yeah, okay, this is what I thought
it was. So I see his follow-up. All right, so it's not a paper trail.
Yeah, let me just read it out for people on the podcast here. So basically, I was never getting a response from the bureaus whether they were investigating or not end results. Okay.
So it is a requirement in the Fair Credit Reporting Act for the credit reporting agencies to send the consumer results of their investigation if you dispute something with the credit bureaus. So Mike, thank you for clarifying because that makes everything a whole lot more clear for me. And they're either required to send it or they're required to cause that it be sent, meaning that if they're using some sort of a vendor to fulfill that obligation, and the vendor has to also send it. So I can tell you that the CARES Act did not amend the Fair Credit Reporting Act to remove that obligation vis-a-vis the credit bureaus having to provide results of their investigations within a reasonable period of time. So if the bureaus aren't sending those to you, I don't know why, but there's nothing in the CARES Act that wiped out that obligation from the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
Question from Al Mustafa. Why doing soft inquiries without permission? That's a good question.
So you're not going to like my answer. They don't have to have permission to do a soft inquiry. So that's why you don't get permission from you. So if you look at your, and this is more, it's a contemporary world. It's not as prevalent as it was 10, 15 years ago. They used to be able to come home from work and your mailbox was full of credit card offers where, indicating that you had been pre-approved for some form of credit. And so those were all the result of a soft inquiry being run against your credit report. And they don't have to ask you, hey, Mike or David or Jimmy, can I pull your credit report and send you an offer? They don't have to ask you that. You don't have that right to require that be asked of you. You certainly have the right to opt out and block the use of your credit report for pre-approval, or it's called pre-qualification. And if you look at the next credit card offer you get in the mail and you flip it over and you grab a magnifying glass and look at the microprint on the back of the page, and you'll see that there's language in there that gives you information on how you can opt out. You can either opt out online, or you can actually call a telephone number and opt out of being in those pre-screens offers. And when you do opt out, you're going to be surprised at just how, your mail is going to drop off the shelf. The amount of garbage you get is going to be reduced significantly. And people often ask me, John, is it a good idea to opt out? Look, I'm going to let everybody be adults and make that decision for themselves. I have opted out, and the reason I have opted out because even though we live in 2021 and we're in a high-tech world, fraudsters are still operating at low tech in some scenarios, which means that they're not above grabbing stuff out of your mailbox. And so there's a wealth of information that's attached to all those pre-approved offers. I could look at a pre-approved offer and tell you what your credit score is, even though your credit score isn't included. If you're getting offers from American Express for their Platinum card, I know you've got great credit. If you have offers from Credit One Bank offering you credit limits of $1,000, I know you have lousy credit. So you can tell a lot about somebody just by looking at those offers. And so I've opted out because A, I don't want that crap in my mailbox, and B, also eliminates at least that component of information that can be stolen. Now, David, let me clear up what I think may come as a follow-up question. There is no shortage of crap on YouTube about how to increase your credit, and use made by people who suggest that opting out will improve your credit score. As in, if you opt out, your score will go up because you've opted out. That is factually inaccurate. If your credit score went up after you opted out, it is a coincidence. It has nothing to do with the fact that you have opted out. There's nothing on a credit report, there's no scorable attribute on a credit report from the opt-out process that is considered by scoring systems. Yes, you should opt out, yes. Good
there
call.
We go. Excellent. Okay, we got Jimmy's got a really good question, and coincidentally, Jimmy, this is something that we are going to address. Let me just put that on there. Okay, question. I've disputed late payments on my student loan accounts. TransUnion has updated my late payments by completely removing them. However, the other two bureaus have not. Am I to conclude the other two bureaus will follow suit? Okay. John, that's a question that people ask a lot. It's
a great question.
If the data furnisher largely is the one that provides instruction, I'm assuming, or we can assume to the credit bureaus, why would one have a successful deletion or removal or modification and one or more bureaus would not?
So first off, Jimmy, I don't just say it's a great question just to be all fake and make you feel good about yourself. That is legitimately a great question. The credit reporting agencies all conduct independent, and believe it or not, they're called reinvestigations, even though re suggests that it's already happened once and they're doing it again. But believe it or not, in the statute, they're referred to as reinvestigations, even though it's just an investigation. So the credit bureaus all perform independent investigations. So in other words, Equifax don't get together and say, hey, something, let me take this and I'll let you know what the result was, and we can all kind of, what I guess the term is, singing from the same hymnal, that we can all to Jimmy. They all do it independently, and even though the furnisher is supposed to respond uniformly to all three of the bureaus if you're disputing something through the bureaus, that doesn't necessarily mean that the credit reporting agencies don't necessarily have their own policies with respect to skipping that dispute resolution process and either deleting something out of their own, per their own policy, and then the other two allowing the investigation to run. So what you do see sometimes is inconsistency. You may have one credit bureau that deletes something without actually doing any investigation with the furnishing party because they deleted it per their policy, where the other two bureaus don't have that policy and they're actually letting the investigation run its course and the item comes back verified. So you have one credit bureau that deletes, two credit bureaus that do not, and you have inconsistency. Where that normally happens, not not universally, but where that normally happens is issues of alleged fraud, where one credit bureau is like, you know what, I believe this guy, I'm going to delete the account, or I'm going to delete this information because they're contending that it's fraud. And the other two bureaus are like, you know what, we're going to go to the furnisher, we're going to let them tell us if they believe that it's fraud or not, and then we'll delete it or leave it according based on what we hear back from those two bureaus.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, Mike Smothers. John, I'm going to let you answer this one. I'm going to have somebody shut the streaming TV off here because I think that's slowing down our internet while we're getting a little skippy here. So let me bring Mike on, and then I'll be back in 10, 15 seconds. Okay. Mike, if you freeze your credit, can you still dispute items in your reports? I'll be right back.
Do you want me to answer for that?
Yes, please, if you would.
Okay. Hey, so now now while the cat's away, the mice will play. So while David's gone, we can talk about other stuff. We can talk about inquiries again if y'all want to. So the security freeze that you're referring to, Mike, does not affect the dispute resolution process. The only thing that a security freeze or a credit freeze, depending on what you want to call it, it's the same thing. The only thing that the security freeze does is it prevents access to the credit report by parties with whom you do not have an existing relationship. So that's it. Security freezes do not affect credit scores. Security freezes do not affect the dispute resolution process. Security freezes do not disallow you from getting copies of your own credit report. Security freezes do not disallow collection agencies to pull credit reports for the purposes of debt collection. And security freezes distinct lenders from pulling your credit reports for the various account management purposes where they've got a permissible purpose to do so. And by the way, if you haven't frozen your credit reports, and here I am giving you my 2 cents, all you have to do is flip on the news or fire up your browser, and once a month there's news of a colossal data breach. And so I think all of our information has been I don't want to say compromised, because who cares if someone can see my name on my Facebook page? So, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of the information that we hold personal has been at least exposed to some extent by, any variety of the dozens and dozens of large-scale data breaches that we've all kind of become almost numb to. The last security breach that I really cared about was the Target data breach. And since then, there have been Yahoo and MyFitnessPal and Equifax and Cap One and Experian, the New York Yankees, basically every government agency, every college, university. And at this point, I'm like, what? If someone wants to apply for credit in mine, I have no law anyways, and my credit report goes, and so knock yourself out, buddy. There's, I think, are probably at more risk.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see. Mike, I have to say, well, I've learned more today here than I have ever on credit. Thank you. I'll be back next week for sure. Sounds great, Mike. Love to have you back. Okay, Scott's got a question. Just got a letter from a bank stating they reported one or more payments to the 3 bureaus incorrectly and that they have corrected it. Is this usually going to help or hurt the credit score?
Well, it depends on what corrected means. I'm assuming that corrected means that they have removed the late payments. I think that's probably a safe assumption, but I wouldn't bet the farm on that. So the effect of any change to the credit report is really only meaningful if what was there beforehand was causing a measurable negative impact to your score. And also I'll use example that I like to use a lot is, hey, I got a collection removed. Fantastic. You've got 10 others. So there's really no material difference in the risk profile of your credit report. And so you shouldn't expect any change in your score. So to the extent that you had late payments removed from your credit report, and that was the only negative information on your credit reports, then I would expect, and I don't know what else is on the credit report, right? There's a lot of moving parts in scoring systems. So to the extent that those were the only 3 things that were derogatory, and let's say that they were really, really recent, then I would expect your score to go up in a way that's going to make you very happy. If these were 3 late payments from 6 years ago, and you've got a bunch of other late payments that are more current, I wouldn't expect any change in your score at all. But to the extent that you got incorrect information removed, then that's great. I mean, obviously, that's what we all strive for, is to have accurate credit reports.
Very good. I was about to start off with, let me see. Anybody here want to know about bankruptcy? How bankruptcy affects the credit report? All right,
it's very counterintuitive. It's not one of these, oh, that's an easy question. It's not what you think.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, Mike, one more thing, if you don't mind, is there a place to find all the bureau's numbers to call and freeze my credit? Thanks again.
It's actually pretty easy. First off, unlike credit monitoring services where you can sign up for one and they'll monitor all three, there is no one-stop shopping for security freezes. You have to freeze them all independently. So you're going to have to go to the Equifax website, the TransUnion website, and the Experian website. If you just Google Equifax security freeze, Experian security freeze, TransUnion security freeze, you're going to end up on their security freeze page once you get past all the ads that Google's going to show you. And then that's where you can set up your freeze. I'll tell you my own personal experience with security freezes. There's a lot of people that poo-poo the security freeze, and the reason that they're kind of anti-security freeze is because it adds an additional step that you have to think about when you want to apply for credit. So when you freeze your credit report and you go out and apply for a loan with someone that you have no relationship with, and if you forget to thaw or unfreeze your credit reports, you're going to get denied because they can't pull your credit report. That's the whole purpose of the freeze. So it actually kind of proves that it works. So you're going to have to add a step to the process when you go to apply. And you're going to only have to learn once or twice that, oh boy, I forgot to unfreeze my reports. The process has become so good that 10, 15 years ago, it took 3 or 4 days to place the freeze and to lift the freeze. You can place the freeze and lift the freeze literally within seconds now, as long as you know your login and password, which you have to have that info for everything else you do online. As long as you have that stuff and you place the security freezes at all three, just don't lose that, because good luck recovering that and convincing the credit bureau, hey, I need to unfreeze this report. Just make sure you don't lose your credentials, but you should be fine. I actually applied for a corporate checking account, and with a very well-known national bank. And as I was sitting there across from the banker, I realized, oh, wait a minute, they may pull my personal credit reports even to open a commercial bank account. And I asked the business banker, hey, are you going to pull my credit report? He goes, yeah, we pull Equifax credit reports. And I'm like, dude, you got to give me a second. So I go on my phone, and literally I'm like logging into my Equifax security freeze account, and I thaw my Equifax report while I'm sitting across from this guy. Yeah. And then moments later, he's actually able to pull my report, and everything went well. But that just kind of illustrates just how efficient that freezing and thawing process has become. 10 years ago, I couldn't have done that. I would have had to come back a week later. But today, the process has become really streamlined. And Trump signed a bill into law that, among other things, amended the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it made security freezes free 100% of the time, 24/7, 365. So if you end up on a website that wants to charge you to place a security freeze, you're in the wrong place, because the credit bureaus can't charge for those anymore.
Excellent. Jimmy's got a question. Okay, I'm now in round 3, approaching round 4. I've not received any valid documents on any of the items I've disputed, and I'm day 70 plus. It's frustrating that they're not sending the doc. Well, Jimmy, it depends on what you're asking them to give you. Like if you're asking them to give you a copy of the original contract you signed, you're not going to get it. They don't have that. And John, I think we talked about this maybe 2 or 3 lives ago that there's limitations to what you can ask for as far as the dispute process goes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, just to finish my thought on that. And Jimmy,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you're not getting any response at all and like nothing's coming in the mail, then send an email at support@creditversio.com, and we'll have somebody take a look at your account. Maybe maybe your IDs are missing. Who knows? But just to go back and answer that question, John, about what you can ask for and what you can't ask for.
Well, look, so this kind of goes along the line. I'm actually trying to pull it up now. It kind of goes along the line with that. Thank you, Mike. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Mike.
With that 609 dispute letter myth, that if you ask for something from the credit bureaus and they don't have it, that they have to remove the trade line or the collection account because they don't have some document that you're asking for. So Section 609 does not give you the right to ask for stuff that the credit bureaus don't have. So you can ask for whatever you want to ask for. Hey, I want a copy of my original loan application. And if you don't have it, you have to delete my repossessed auto loan. You can ask them that. It's not going to go anywhere because you don't have the right stuff that they don't have. You have the right to stuff that they do have. So that's why you're not going to get any documents from the credit bureaus. I've never heard of the credit bureaus providing documents other than just copies of credit reports when the dispute resolution process has been completed. To the extent that you are disputing something through a furnisher, they may send you documents, but there's no requirement that I know of in the FCRA that requires anybody to give anybody documents regarding, kind of the underlying obligations on the report. The only time I actually see that, David, to be honest with you, is in lawsuits, and they're part of the discovery process. And so you may see, plaintiff's document production or some lender's document production that would include, things like applications, closing documents, statements, copies of or verification of payments, communication back and forth between the lender and the debtor, things like if you call in and ask about getting a credit limit increase, they may send you a letter verifying that it's been increased. So that's normally the only time I ever see documents like that is when they're part of lawsuit document production.
Scott Oliver's got a question here. Is there any, I know this is a subject that you like talking about, John. Is there any truth to the rumor that Biden wants to end the three bureaus and have one government agency managing that? John, you did a really good video on this for trade line secrets, I think, not too long ago that I saw.
Yeah, so look, I don't pretend to be an expert in politics, and I realize it is a dividing topic. And so I want to be really, really careful not to sit here and be all political on any of you because A, it's none of your business, and B, it's just going to, it solves 0% of problems and it leads to arguments 100% of the time. So it's not a pleasant thing. However, our current president did in fact campaign on a promise to replace the three credit reporting agencies with one, what's called a public option. And that's code for a government-run credit bureau that is housed under the CFPB. That was his idea. It has gotten, when one party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, people tend to be able to push things through, even if you don't have any cooperation from the minority party. And so it is absolutely something that's being discussed. It gets media attention from time to time because Biden did in fact campaign on it. And there's a nonprofit, very liberal organization called Demos, DEMOS, that is really pimping this idea. And I have been very, very vocal in my opposition to it for a variety of reasons, notwithstanding the fact that the three states that helped get him elected, Georgia, Illinois, and California, are that's where the credit bureaus are, and they're all states that are blue. So they helped President Biden become President Biden. Collectively, the three credit bureaus employ about 20,000 people in those states. They're all going to lose their job. There's just so many things wrong with the idea. Number one, the assumption that a government-run credit bureau housed by the CFPB is somehow going to be more accurate than a credit bureau that is privately owned or publicly held. And really all you're doing is replacing one warehouse with another warehouse. The problem with credit reports isn't the credit bureaus. The problem with credit reports are the 11,000 companies that send information to the credit bureaus. If you just swap out the warehouse, you're not changing inaccurate information being furnished. You're just changing the warehouse. So an error sent in by Joe's bank is still going to be an error sent in by Joe's bank. It's just going to be on your CFPB credit report versus your Equifax credit report. So I don't like the idea. There's been I think the term that was used is wafer thin as far as any sort of details about how is this going to work, what are you going to do, and the details are just simply not there. It's just one of these things that I guess conceptually, hey, let's change the system to make it more fair for everybody. I think no one disagrees with that. That would be fantastic. But when you're like, well, how are you going to do it? The answers are, oh, we're just going to do it, and that's not an answer. And I actually co-presented with a lawyer from Demos at an event, and I asked her that question. And the first question was well, so if you're going to get rid of, which of the credit bureaus are you going to keep? Because and she's like, no, we're going to get rid of all of them, and we're going to create a new one. I was like, whoa, that's pretty major. I'm not aware of the U.S. government ever basically destroying an entire industry to replace it with some other option. By the way, do you know that the CFPB quantified the number of disputes coming in annually as 8 million? 8 million disputes come in annually, and that's per the CFPB, not per the credit bureaus or John Ulzhiemer. Mm-hmm. If you have a calculator, divide 8 million by 365, and that'll tell you how many disputes the credit bureaus receive on average on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. You have a 30-day requirement to respond to those, right? You can't just take 6 months to respond to those. The CFPB employs 1,500 people, and 0 of them process credit bureau disputes because there is no credit bureau under the CFPB right now.
Right.
They would have to double the size of the agency to effectively handle 8 million disputes on an annual basis, because you can't just assume that all of a sudden there aren't going to be any disputes just because you have a public option credit bureau. So again, there's so many things that don't make a lot of sense with this idea, notwithstanding one, that the credit bureaus aren't the problem. It's the furnishers that are the problem. Y'all aren't mad at Equifax. You're mad at the collection agencies. You're not mad at TransUnion. You're mad at the banks. That's really who you're mad at, because that's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to replace it with, and where is this going to come from? I mean, I think it's an impossible task.
Don't ask them that question, because they don't have an answer to it. And we've asked these questions. These are legitimate questions. What are you going to do? Are you going to just create a fourth one and then force lenders to use it, or are you just going to make the credit bureaus illegal? Hey, what are you going to do? And we're just going to make it better. And you get these like flim-flam, platitude-filled answers,
right,
which aren't answers. So that's the thing that's frustrating is, two of these 3 companies are publicly traded in the U.S. Equifax and TransUnion are public companies. They have investors, right? There are mutual funds and retirement funds that have invested in those companies. If they just get rid of them, guess what happens to the value of your 401k and your mutual funds that have invested in those companies? I can tell you it ain't going to be good. What about FICO? FICO only exists because of the 3 credit bureaus. They are their 3 distribution partners. FICO doesn't sell their own scores to anybody. They're sold by the bureaus. If you eliminate the bureaus, you're also getting rid of FICO. And that's X thousands of employees that are also in California. So there's a lot of stuff that makes absolute, but no one cares what John thinks, and no one's asked John what I think, except for a few journalists. But no one in Washington has asked me what I think about this idea.
It seems like these ideas tend to come from people who have no depth of understanding of the subject matter. Like, well, we're just going to go out and we're gonna build a 400-story building. We've never built a building in our life, but you know what? We're going to do it. I mean, that's what this sounds like.
Remember, these are the same, people who serve the public in Washington, aka politicians. These are the same folks that put the inquiry language on adverse action notices, right? I actually sat through congressional if you ever want to see a bunch of people who don't know what the hell they're talking about, go sit through congressional testimony. It is maddening. I actually sat through congressional testimony several years ago where I sat and had to listen to politicians from both sides, so I'm being equally critical here, talk about how that they're mortified that their constituents are not getting jobs because they have low credit scores.
Oh, Lord.
And no one thought to point out, whoa, credit scores aren't used by employers. No one thought to point that out. They just sat there one after the other and basically lied and said, we have so many people in my community that aren't getting jobs because they have bad credit scores. I'm thinking, really? 0 people in your community aren't getting jobs because of their credit scores, because credit scores aren't used by employers. So it's almost like they've created this unicorn, and now they're pissed off at it, and now they want to get rid of it. But the unicorn actually doesn't exist. So that's the problem. And look, the people who are pushing this idea are really pushing this idea. But I guarantee you, everyone who loses their job because of this is going to be really upset about it. And that's just the 4 companies that I can think of. Think of all the tangential industries around the credit reporting agencies that aren't called Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and FICO. They're what happens to all those companies? No one can quantify the number of people that would lose their jobs if this actually becomes a reality.
I can't imagine it would. There's going to be so much pushback if we start looking at something that even slightly appears to be getting close to this. Okay.
Well, stay tuned. Because, I mean, who knows? I'm not a political expert, so I don't know how all that stuff works. But just, stay tuned.
All right. We're coming up on right about 50 minutes. Anybody else have any questions they want to throw our way? Otherwise, I think we're going to call it an afternoon. I didn't expect we're going to get into the tail end of that. Who caused that? Whose fault was that? Was that Scott Oliver? Yes, it was. He probably.
I think he's the guy who asked the question and had to drop off.
Yeah. Smart man. We got us spun up for about a good 10 minutes there. Okay. I think that's going to be it.
I just hate anything. I hate any idea that is going to cause people to lose their job. That really bothers me, right? Especially it's so hard to find a good job these days and a good career. Anything that is really poorly thought out that is absolutely going to lead to a lot of people on the unemployment line really bothers me.
Well, this is aside from the fact that just on a technical side, how is it? What are they going to do? I mean, they'd have to go into the bureaus to learn how to do this.
Why would the bureaus allow that? That's crazy.
They're not.
Absolutely. Why the bureau? Equifax, you're gonna eliminate me. Come on in and learn all my secrets. That is absurd.
Let me give you 100 years of data collection and experience and knowledge. They're gonna tell them to go pound sand.
You're also going to have to require 11,000 companies to start sending them information, because that's how information gets to the credit bureaus. It's furnished voluntarily by over 11,000 different companies. Now you're going to require all of them, some of them who have really deep pockets and don't want to deal with you, to also now furnish information to this last man standing credit reporting agency. And by the way, all you credit repair companies, you're out of business too, because
Well, I didn't want to be the one to say it, but
perfect.
that came to mind. There's about 100,000 credit repair businesses in the U.S. And
they're all gone.
They're all gone. And there's some big companies out there, and also have some deep pockets. Yeah,
that's right.
Okay, all right. Let's do this. We'll go out with a bang here. Nathan's got a question. We'll finish up here. What causes a collection to re-age?
Yeah, so there's 2 types of re-aging. By the way, this is another term that is grossly misrepresented by people who don't understand the term. There's only 2 types of re-aging in the world of credit. Number 1 is credit report re-aging and debt re-aging. So I assume I can't assume that, because you're referring to collection. So if every state has what's called a statute of limitations that limits the amount of time that you can sue a consumer to collect a debt from them. And you may have heard Nathaniel, you may have heard the term time barred debt. Once that debt goes past that period of time, depending on the state, some states it's as little as 3 years, and some states I think it's 15 years in some states. So, and then all the other states kind of fall in between. So once the debt has aged past that whatever it is in the state, then it becomes what's referred to as time barred debt. And they can still try to collect it from you, but they can't sue you to collect it unless it becomes re-aged. And re-aged in this context is not illegal. All it means is that some act has happened. Either you've made a payment on it or you've made a commitment to make a payment on it that essentially starts that clock over again, and it is no longer time barred debt. So that's one type of re-aging. So now there's credit report re-aging, which is an entirely different thing. So we all know that collections are only allowed to remain on a credit report for no longer than 7 years from the date of the first delinquency with the original creditor, not 7 years from the date that the collector got it. The collector cannot report it for 7 years because they didn't get it immediately when the item became delinquent with the original creditor. The only definition of re-aging as it pertains to credit reporting is changing the date of first delinquency, sometimes referred to as the anchor date or the trigger date, is changing that date to make it more recent. That is illegal unless you're correcting it, unless it was wrong and now you're correcting it and it just happens to be more current. You're not allowed to change that date. So if you don't believe John Ulzhiemer, fine. The CFPB defines it like that. Federal Trade Commission defines it like that. The credit reporting agencies define it like that. The National Consumer Law Center defines it like that. And Consumer Union of the United States defines it like that. Other than the credit bureaus, all four of those other organizations unapologetically represent the rights of consumers. No one would ever argue that the FTC, the CFPB, Consumers Union, and the National Consumer Law Center are lackeys for the credit industry. And so they all have the same definition of credit report re-aging, which is changing that date of first delinquency to be more recent inappropriately.
I think Nathaniel's clarifying the question a little bit, meaning if you have a collection at almost 7 years and you settle, does it extend longer?
Nope. There's nothing you can do, absolutely 100% nothing you can do as a consumer debtor to change the date of first delinquency on a collection or a trade line. Nothing. You can ignore it, you can settle it, you can pay it in full, you can dispute it, you can go dance outside the collection agency's front door. It is irrelevant what you do. They cannot restart that credit reporting clock, period.
All right. Excellent. Nathaniel, you're welcome, sir. And I think we'll wrap up with that. John,
okay.
Once again, great Facebook Live. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And if you have any other questions that we didn't get to, or you see this after we've done it live, then just put it in the comments, and we will absolutely get to it. Thank you so much for joining me. John, thank you for coming today. And then we will see you on the next live.
Thanks, y'all.